terms of your family go exceedingly deep here based on that.
Interestingly enough, my great-great-grandmother arrived in Canada 200 years ago this year. She arrived in 1825.
Amazing.
That people were, you know, as you're saying, not as mobile. So families stayed intact. You know, there might have been one that went off to open up the West. You know, always somebody went to Toronto. But there was always a nut of family that stayed sort of where they began. So there was that continuity. And once I came back, you know, I lived in Europe. I lived in Toronto for a long time, went to school in Toronto. Once I came back, I found people that were most interested in my family history were the families that had moved away. Like the first history was done by a family member that part of the family had moved to BC. One of the people I'm dealing with now lives in Manitoba, in Winnipeg. And I've had people from Alberta and from Saskatchewan at various times, because I'm the person they can find that's now living back here.
Right.
And if you've lost that connection, then it really kind of all falls apart. I have the photographs of my great grandparents, and I have this photograph that hangs in Queen's Park. And you can look at those, and it's really quite wonderful, because you have have this sense of time, and maybe there's a little twig in here that I have those eyes, or there's a connection that a photograph will do that just the words won't.
Yes.
But the photographs we take now, that's not going to happen. People don't have formal photographs on the paper that will withstand the test of time. I grew up north of Newtonville.
Okay.
It's called Reid Road. It's between I lived between the 3rd and 4th concessions. And my father grew up on that farm. His father did, and his grandfather did. And my great-great-grandfather lived across the road. So that was starting in, the early 1800s. Each generation always had a house in town. Many were in Bowmanville. Ours happened to be in Orono. So when I was 14, we moved to the house in Orono. And Ian and Sylvia, the folk singers, ended up owning our farm. But the joy in that was it has allowed me to have a sense of place. And as I've aged, I realize how valuable that is. It elevates who I am to me, and gives others a sense of roots that's beyond my own roots. Just as we look at maybe a school that we went to or a main street, we need those things to kind of keep us centered and keep us there's a security to it, I suppose. There's also a sense of responsibility to it. And I think that's incredibly important, because once we lose a sense of responsibility to our community, then that which we can bring is lost. And if we ever take the volunteer out of our communities, the quality of life is diminished greatly. But my great-grandmother ended up pretty much running the family farm. We always had farms, but they always did other stuff as well. And in the nice weather, my grandmother drove to Port Hope every Saturday to market. So when I drive to Port Hope, which I do frequently, almost all my professional people are in Port Hope, I think, how long would it have taken her to drive from the farm to Port Hope? And the Crellies were really good friends, and they lived in Port Hope. So she always put her horse with them and carriage, and she always had lunch with the Crellies before she came home. But I presume she took stuff to market. I don't think she went there to buy. I presume she took stuff. But I don't really know that. I just know that she went to market. So as I drive in my SUV, all I can think of is, oh God, I can do this in 25 minutes because I go down to Newtonville and then along too. I wonder how long it would have taken, and I can't surmise. A good trotting horse can go so many miles an hour, but for only sustain it for so long. So it would have been, a true effort, but that's how long it would have taken, so it wouldn't have the same effect that it would, for you and me thinking, oh crap, 3 hours to go one way. I think, there's all the aspects of people that came out of all these little one-room schoolhouses. And the majority of Canada was built by people that came out of those little one-room schoolhouses. This morning I spent probably an hour and a half chatting with my oldest friend. We started grade 1 together at that Reid school. And, went through to grade 8. My father went there, his father went there. His grandfather went there, also taught there, and great-great-grandfather gave it. I saw opportunity here. The area was changing, was becoming more urbane, still strong agricultural roots, but a lot of urban people buying weekend places and a lot of artists. So whenever you get beautiful, you get artists that go with it. So, And then the one thing that really twigged, I had been part of a book club in Toronto, and we could only read Canadian books. And that goes back to the late 60s. And I'm telling you, it was hard to find a lot of Canadian books in the late 60s. So when I kind of then, took me a few years to actually move out here permanently, I thought I wanted to do something about both of those things. I wanted to do something about the art community that doesn't have any place, there wasn't a visual arts center, any of those things. And I really wanted to do something about Canadian books. So I started a gallery and had...
In Orono?
Right here, that building. Yep, the old drive shed.
Okay.
Renovated it inside. And I had about 100 artists and craftspeople, wonderful artists. Became a dealer for Cape Dorset Fine Arts, went to the Arctic, Cape Dorset.
Wow.
And I had a huge Canadian book business. Because there weren't that many places that you could buy Canadian books. So it was a wonderful combination, and it was very folksy. I mean, because of the lie of the land, etc. I thought it's kind of almost like people coming into my home, even though it was separated. So my motto was "The coffee pot is always on," and it was. The book Out of the Mist. When Sid
Mark
wrote
just
that,
mentioned that like 20 minutes ago.
I published that book,
Oh,
actually.
okay. Good for you.
Yeah. Helen Schmid researched it. Sid wrote it. And then they didn't know how to get it on the market. So Helen came to see me when I had my shop and I had Canadian books. And I felt it needed to be published. Just as you are adding to a piece of what is now Clarington, even though it's hard for me to swallow that word.
I know.
Out of the Mists. Wrote and was in black and white that captured a period of time that both Sid and Helen are gone, but Sid in particular, because he had the oral history. Helen did the research and had that kind of history, but he had the color. I just felt it was incredibly important. I have a nice connection to the Rutherfords. The Brimacombes were my relatives, and they owned that property. And Aunt Florence was actually my relative, and Uncle Fred was by marriage. But she would tell me stories. She died in her 90s and still absolutely on the ball. That when she was little, her dad would light fires around the barn at night to keep the wolves away. So I can open all the windows here and hear that cacophony of sound that is echoed, and it's hauntingly beautiful. And it so connects me in another way to where I live.
Yeah.
And it's really quite marvelous.